Hello everyone! We have another changelog, it just came out. It's about Zealor and a few other classes, mainly the Sadida. It got a bit of a nerf, but let's dive into that. So as you can see here, we actually got finally the class idle system in combat. So now on the screen there's just some classes showing. In my opinion, some of them are actually quite nice, others doesn't really make sense or are a bit bugged. Mainly if you have a lot of things on your character, like if you have a shield, if you have like wings, it gets a bit crowded, but overall I think it's a good step. Don't expect that everything will be smooth. There are still some weeks to go, but there are not many weeks until the actually launch. So let's hope they can manage to fix everything until there, or most things until there. And as you can see here for the Masquerader or the Zobal, the position, the idle animation, it's not really good. Mainly it's just a placeholder because nobody liked the last animations. Honestly, I liked the fact that he was like holding the masks, but a lot of people didn't like it, and so because of it, it was removed. And as you can see now, there's a different animation than the previous one, but it doesn't seem that it's actually the final Zobal animation. Let's see how it will be in the next weeks. Also, we have the Oginak and the Ozymandias and the male Zealor that got a bit of an enhance on its looks. So they do have way more detail now, that's a good thing, I like it. Besides that, there was also some fixes, bugs and debugs and optimizations. Also a huge thing now that you do not need to feed the living items. For example, these items where you feed it, then you unlock more styles of this cosmetic. Now it's not necessary, it will be all unlocked from default. So that's a huge improvement, I like that. I don't think that the other thing was necessary. Lore-wise, kind of made sense, but game-wise it doesn't really make sense. So now let's go for the Zealor modification. I'll show you now what was modified. So first of all, we have the Disruption here that got modified. It's a completely different spell. So now instead of being similar to the Frostbite and the Souvenir, basically you just teleport. You basically the teleportation, but you have less range and you can only cast it online. And besides that, it's the 3 action points, but you also do more damage. In my opinion, I really like the last effect because it was from 1 to 6 and you could cast it behind obstacles, so it was honestly very useful, and I used, for example, in my Solotage for the Talkasha so many times. And I'm not so sure if I will use this that much. I'll probably prefer to use the Cog now instead. So now we have also the Frostbite that now you can stack the minus 15 AP parry twice, and you don't need a line of sight. The problem is that you can only cast in line this spell, so it's not the same as it was the Disruption. But it's still okay, it's still fine. It's not crazy good. I think it's a good spell still, but the fact that you always have to cast it online, it's a bit weird and it's not so useful sometimes, mainly if you're playing more range. If you play always like more or less melee close combat, you shouldn't really see a difference. But if you're trying to escape from mobs, for example, this will be a bit tricky to use sometimes. Besides that, the maximum range was also modified. It went from 9 to 6. Now we have the Complice here that you can actually cast it 6 range again, so it's actually super cool. We can finally have it back to 6 range. Besides that, the Zealor's Dial now can give action points to the caster, to the Zealor, but it only lasts 1 turn, also for the allies. The gear also got a huge buff. Now instead being from 0 to 2, now you can cast it up to 5 cells. The problem is that you cannot teleport your Zealor unless you have an enemy on the other side. So unless you do a teleportation symmetrically, I'll show you guys here. Because honestly in Talkasha I would use a lot this spell just to place myself. So for example, now I can't use it to place my own Zealor, I can only do it if I have an enemy or an entity. So it's still fine, I can always put a Complice and switch with the Complice, for example, but sometimes you do not have the action points for it, and it's always good to just like go here and try just to hide a bit more, for example. So it's still fine, you'll have now other tools that can do that. Now the Darkrai has lifesteal. Honestly, guys, this seems that Papineau was watching my last video, me ranting about how Zealor was. So now we have actually a lifesteal in lower levels, so it's not so low level, but level 30 it's really fast, you get it really fast. So I'm wondering how it will be now doing dungeons at lower levels. I'm very curious about it. But as you can see now, the Darkrai, it's the variant of the Drying Up. And the Drying Up now has a different effect. Instead of unbewitching the target and removing action points, now it's basically the same effect that it was before. So you just bounce this spell here in a 2-circle zone. So whoever is in Telefrag and it is in a 2-circle zone, it will rebound this spell around and do damage and also do some lifesteal. Now the cog here, instead of being 4 action points, is 3 action points, but it also has the same functionality as the gear, so you cannot use it on yourself unless you have an entity on the other side to teleport. I think honestly this is quite a good buff. You can cast it with way less action points. I will honestly start using cog instead of disruption now. So now we actually have 2 maximum range as well on the cog, so it went from 1 to 2, which is actually nice because you can cast it on an entity to switch with it. So let's see, for example here, as you can see now you can switch it with an entity because you have 2 range. So this is honestly quite nice because it's just 3 action points. It does quite a good damage. Then we have the Temporal Dust that now has 6 maximum range. It went from 3 to 6 maximum range. This is honestly huge. Mainly like this Temporal Dust and the gear here, I was struggling a lot in the Tal Kasha dungeon, for example, because I needed to switch the enemies to put the boss in the glyphs, but I had so little range with the gear or the Temporal Dust, so I'm glad that now it was increased and I can't wait to see this new improvement. Now we have the spontaneous return that is not a spontaneous return anymore. It's actually called now Astrolabe, and it's basically you just teleport to a cell. So I'll show you guys. It's honestly quite nice. When I told you guys that now we have another tool, for example, if we cannot use the cog, the gear I mean, to do this, we can actually use, for example, the Astrolabe to just do this, okay? So then you have for 2 turns and you can have it sooner if you cast, for example, a Telefrag. So as you guys can see here, I cast the Telefrag, and if I use it again on an enemy, I also got again a Telefrag, and then I can use it also again. So it's quite nice. It's a good spell. It doesn't have much range, it's just 3 range, but it's basically a free teleport. You don't need to do anything. But switching it for the teleport can be a bit tricky, to be honest. Like, I think the teleport is quite an essential tool, and the spontaneous return had its own charm. It will be good, like for example, to get an extra action point, or even to switch enemies with another entities really easily. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. I honestly do not know if this is a good thing. I think for some scenarios it will be good for sure, for others not so good. And I'm not so sure if I will use this or the teleport. I think I will still use the teleport. It seems way more useful still. Then we have the hand that is now just costs 2 action points, and it's always 1 turn the hand state. Before it was 2 turns if the enemies were in Telefrag, but besides that you can only do damage in all enemies if the enemy that you're targeting has Telefrag on it, which I will show you guys here. So let's see that. Let me put everyone in Telefrag. And then, so, as you can see, as long as there is a Telefrag on the enemy that you're targeting, you target also everyone, okay? Honestly, I do not know how do I feel about this, because you just leave it for 1 turn. So, but you always apply the hand state nevertheless. It doesn't need to have a Telefrag, so you can just cast it around, and then whenever you cast it in one enemy that is in Telefrag, then you cast it also, you do damage in every single of them. So you can cast it 3 times per turn now, but I don't like the fact that it's just 1 turn. I don't think it's super useful. I still prefer the Shiverling. I guess the Shiverling is more mono-target and this one is more AoE damage, but still, I'm not a big fan of the hand still. I still prefer the Shiverling if you're playing multi-elemental. Now we have the Clock and the Water Clock. They basically now have lifesteal and they maintain the same damage. And besides that, instead of removing action points, you actually can steal 1 action point. So it's actually quite nice. You can kind of cast this spell for just 3 action points, and even on the next turn, you kind of get more 2 action points. So in the end of everything, you just cast this spell for 1 action point. If you steal the 1 action point, and in the next turn you get 2 action points. So it's actually quite nice, and you get quite good lifesteal. It's quite a good damage. It's quite a high damage spell. Now we have the Shadowy Beam. That was the spell that whenever you target a Telefrag enemy, everyone around will also get the AoE damage and also get the Telefrag, but you will also remove the Telefrag of the enemy that you targeted, but was also actually very good to generate Telefrags and also to generate stacks for the Knell. And now we can actually use it for just 2 action points. So this is a huge buff, honestly. I think this is super important. I had never actually understood when I was doing Tal Kasha, for example, that why this spell would cost 3 action points. It makes way more sense being less damage, but just being 2 action points. Now the Rewind and the Counter can give you action points for your next turn if it's used outside of your turn. For example, use the Rewind and in the end of your turn you return to the position where there is an entity, then you'll get 2 action points for the next turn. And the same thing in the counter here, if you apply this to an ally or enemy or whatever it is and they generate a telefrag, then you'll get 2 action points on the next turn. So this is actually a good improvement. Now the petrification consumes the telefrag. This is honestly quite a nerf because you could just use this over and over and put this spell to 2 action points really easily. But now you need to have a telefrag. It's not super difficult because normally if you're playing chance, mainly in PvP, you're just always in melee target and you can generate telefrags quite easily. Now we have the temporal distortion that doesn't teleport symmetrically, it just teleports to the previous position. Now we have the mummification that no longer reduces one effect cooldown of yourself, but instead you reduce the cooldown of every single utility spell that you have in the Zelor's kit. So you can actually reduce every single spell that you have, besides the elemental spells, by 1 turn. The conservation state no longer removes action points from the enemies, but it gives up to 2 action points every time your ally or yourself, whoever you targeted this spell, is attacked. For example, if you got attacked twice, you'll get 2 action points on the next turn. The temporal instability also got changed, so now the enemies don't get untackled, so they cannot move freely as yourself and your allies, but you can only cast it on yourself, so you don't have the range that you had before. I think it was from 1 to 7 or 1 to 6. Besides that, the enemies can also lose 2 action points whenever they are on top of the glyph. The temporal paradox actually got from 3 action points to 2 action points. This is actually quite nice. Now we have the rollback that you reduce 1 effect duration of every single person in the battlefield. This is honestly quite interesting. I don't know if it will be a bit broken, but it seems super good. Just the fact that you can remove 1 effect duration of everyone in the field is quite crazy. The loss of motivation also changed a bit. If the enemy is in telefrag, you can actually use it again on the enemy. So I don't know how this will work. I don't know if you can remove 2 times the effect. I don't know exactly how this will work, but you can only cast it online now. Now the embalming reduces 2 action points. Honestly, I do not like this spell. I tried to use it several times in my runs, but I never managed to actually put the enemies on the same glyph, on the same place. It never seemed suitable. I would always have to play a lot for them to end on that cell. So I think this should be a bit changed. I like the idea, but I think this should be changed. Now we finished the Zelor and now we have the Zram. Just got a slight nerf on the theft. The Feka here got a slight buff because now you do not need a line of sight to use the Taraxi, Bastion and Barricade. The Steamer got just a fix and the Sadida got a huge nerf. So I don't think this will change a lot. It basically just decreases the potential of movement points removal of the Sadida, but honestly I always thought that these removing 3 movement points was a lot. Normally in PvP people just have up to 7 movement points, not more than that. So removing 3 action points, you just need 2 spells to remove every single movement point from everyone. So now I don't think it will be a huge change for Sadida. I don't think it will be really bad. He will still be able to put everyone with 0 movement points if he wants. But you also have the Miasma with less 1 infection duration. And then we also have the Brambles. When you summon the Brambles, you basically now the Brambles have half of the HP. I think this was a deserved nerf for the Sadida. Honestly, I think it will not suffer too much, mainly for the people that play it with damage. I don't think it will be such a huge change. But let me know in the comments what you guys think, people that play Sadida. And this was everything for today. I like the new changes. I think the Zelor here still needs a few things. Honestly, the lifesteal spells, honestly, they are quite good, and it's nice to see that 2 of them, you get them low level. But this new spell, Astrolabe, I don't think it will be super useful comparing with the Spontaneous Return. But don't worry guys, I will try again leveling up a Zelor to see if it's actually better now early game. And I will also do some content level 200 so you guys can see if it's worth to play now with Zelor. Honestly, now it has way more tools, mainly to debuff, to unbewitch. Now we have so many different tools to unbewitch. So let's see. Honestly, I'm very curious to see how it will be, how it will play solo, for example, trying to do solotages, and also in a team, okay? So I hope you guys have enjoyed. This was everything for today. The changelog will be also down there in the comments. It will probably just be available in French, so guys, I'm sorry for that, but Uncommon always takes a bit of time to translate it. So let me know what you guys think. If you like my content, please subscribe and see you next time.